Home is where the heart is, or at least that's where the phrase always is said. And the home usually means our family, the people who are our immediate family. And yet, home doesn't always necessarily need to be that. Instead, home really should be Christ. Because home sometimes when we mean family, isn't always so easy. I mean, half the marriages end in divorce, there's that. But even that, each marriage that still remains has its share of troubles. I mean, no marriage is just one unending joy after unending joy. And Hannah definitely knows this. Hannah has a problem. Hannah doesn't have any children. And she's been crying and she's upset about it. And her husband, to his credit, tries to buck her up by saying, "Hey, baby, ain't I worth more than 10 sons?" Surprisingly, that doesn't work. And so immediately she goes to the temple. She's going and she's crying. She's crying her eyes out. She's silently praying. And the prophet Eli comes to her and says to her, "Why are you making such a drunken spectacle of yourself? Sober up and get out." And she says, "Don't think, I haven't had any drink. It's just my unending grief that has caused me to be this way." And Eli, I'm sure embarrassed, says, "Okay, go in peace. I'm sure God has heard you." And I always think of her last line to Eli, "Think well of your maidservant," and leaves. And so then, she finally has her male child, this miracle baby, where she thought she would never have it. The thing that she was been hungry and thirsting for and crying about and upset and everything else, and she gives him back. He gives him back to the very person who said, "Why are you making a drunken spectacle of yourself?" To that man, she gives her only son that she longed for. She gave it back to God. She put God at the center of her life. That was the most important thing to her. And that's really what forms the basis of a holy family. It's kind of easy for Mary and Joseph to have that. I mean, after all, you have the Son of God as your son. That's pretty simple. But then they lose him. And when they lose him, they think the worst. Maybe he's dead. And come back sorrowing to Jerusalem to try and find him. Let's think about it. One day out, realize he's not there. One day back just to get to Jerusalem. And one day that they start to search. And one of the first places I'm sure they searched was the temple. And they found Jesus in the temple. And then we know the rest of the story. We just heard it. He goes and was obedient to the rest of the time. But this is an important story in the Gospel of Luke because this is a bookend. And this bookend is the story of them finding of Jesus in the temple. And the second bookend is the two disciples who are going on the road to Emmaus. Just as Mary and Joseph are going away from Jerusalem, the two disciples are going away from Jerusalem. While they are thinking that he is coming back, wondering if he's dead, the other ones are wondering if he's actually alive. And it's in that following that Jesus Christ appears to those disciples and in the breaking of the bread. And when they finally encounter Christ in that breaking of the bread, they do not go back to the temple. Instead, they go back to the community of believers who have said, "We have seen him alive." Luke is telling us that's the new temple. The new temple where Christ resides is in the heart of you and me, the believers of Jesus Christ who is risen from the dead. That's where we go to encounter him. And the smallest unit that we find him is in the family. Where 2 or 3 gathered are in my name, there I am in the midst. And if they are in the midst, then we can indeed have a holy family. And as we gather together as a church, we gather as a holy church, or a parish, a holy diocese, a holy church. But it begins with inviting Jesus Christ into our lives. There's so many things that could take us away. The first, as we see from Hannah, where she is struggling with something. And in our lives and our families, we might be struggling with something. It could be a variety, could be a health issue, could be a loss, could be a divorce, could be a job thing, could be a million and one things that focus all our time and energy away from Jesus Christ. It could be a sin where Jesus Christ is killed in the family, like for the disciples on the road to Emmaus. Some sin has broken the family. But most often, I think it's the drift. Just like Joseph and Mary. They're going along thinking Christ is with them when they've left him far behind. So how do we get him back? And that's the answer in the second reading. Remember Jesus' new commandment to his disciples at the Last Supper. Love one another as I have loved you. Love is that answer of bringing Christ back to the center of our family life, to the center of our families, so that indeed when Christ is the center of our families, then indeed all our families will be holy. And then indeed home will be where the heart is.